The sky of Varith shimmered like liquid glass, bands of violet and silver swirling above a horizon made of crystal mountains and floating clouds of gold. It was beautiful, unreal, and dangerous all at once. Lieutenant Jack Mercer had seen hundreds of planets during his service with the United Human Fleet, but none were like this one. The light here never stayed still. The air hummed faintly, as if the whole world was singing. And now, for the first time, humans were allowed to walk its surface. The Varans were proud and ancient, tall, graceful beings with smooth, silver-blue skin and 4 eyes that could see emotion as easily as color. They didn't trust humans easily. To them, humanity was young, chaotic, unpredictable. Jack had been chosen to represent Earth as a peace officer in the Alliance program. It was an honor, or at least that's what Command had told him. Mostly, it just felt like pressure. He stepped out of the landing pod, blinking against the soft light. Dozens of Varans stood waiting, wearing long white cloaks that shimmered like mist. Their leader stepped forward, a woman taller than him, with eyes like molten silver. "Welcome, human," she said through a translator. "I am Captain Sura Velthier, protector of the Eastern Citadel." Jack nodded, smiling politely. "Thank you, Captain. It's an honor to be here." Then another voice spoke, the same tone but softer, more playful. "I am Lyra Velthier, her sister, also protector and her better half." Jack turned. Another Varan stood beside Sura, identical, except for the faint blue glow that rippled across her hair. She smiled in a way that made his stomach tighten. "Twins?" he asked. "Born of the same storm," Lyra said proudly, "but I arrived first." "By 12 seconds, Sura replied dryly, "and you have never let me forget it." They both looked at him, studying, measuring, amused. He tried not to fidget. "I'll try not to get in your way." Lyra tilted her head. "You already are." He blinked. "Oh, sorry." She laughed, a sound like bells in a soft breeze. "Relax, human, we tease. It is our way." He smiled awkwardly, trying to play along. "Well, I guess that makes us even. Humans tease too." Sura raised an eyebrow. "You will fit right in then if you survive." That didn't sound like a joke. Over the next few days, Jack worked beside them in the Varith Citadel, a structure built from living crystal that shifted color with the sunlight. His role was to help align human scanning technology with Varan systems. It was awkward. The Varans spoke mostly in their own tongue, a fluid, musical language that shimmered in the air like song. He was expected to rely on his translator. But what they didn't know was that Jack had been trained in over a dozen alien dialects, and though the Varan language was complex, he had studied it secretly for months. He understood more than they realized. "He watches us when he thinks we do not see," Lyra said one day, her tone teasing. "Humans always stare," Sura replied. "They cannot help it, their eyes are too simple." "He is kind, though," Lyra added softly. "He smiles even when he is lost." Jack almost dropped his datapad. He forced a casual grin and pretended not to understand. If they knew he could follow their words, he'd never hear the end of it. Besides, there was something fascinating about listening to what people said when they believed you couldn't. And the truth was he liked their voices. Sura's calm, sharp command, Lyra's soft, musical mischief. They were like day and night, one made of logic, the other of laughter. And together, they were impossible to ignore. On the 5th day, the twins took him outside the citadel to the glass plains, where the wind sang through crystal dunes. The air was cool, thin, filled with drifting light. They worked in silence for hours, gathering readings from the soil. Then Lyra suddenly spoke, again in her native tongue. "He is quiet," she said. "Perhaps he does not like us." "Humans are often silent when uncertain," Sura replied. "They fear offending." "Or perhaps," Lyra said with a sly grin, "he is hiding something." Jack's hands froze over his scanner. "She's getting close." Hiding? Sura asked. Yes, his eyes listen when his ears do not. He understands more than we think. Jack glanced up and found Lyra staring right at him. Her lower pair of eyes narrowed slightly, gleaming with challenge. Human, she said aloud, switching to the universal tongue. What are you thinking right now? He smiled. That I should probably stop working before I break something expensive. Sura gave a short laugh, a wise answer. But Lyra didn't look away. Strange, she murmured. For a man who speaks so little, his eyes speak too much. Jack shrugged, forcing a small grin. Maybe you're just reading them wrong. Perhaps, she said softly, but I do not think so. That night, Jack lay awake in his small quarters, staring at the shifting ceiling lights. He could still hear their voices in his head, their words echoing in the alien tongue he wasn't supposed to know. They teased, yes, but beneath it there was curiosity, a spark of respect. And maybe, if he was honest with himself, something more. He turned onto his side and whispered into the empty room. Keep teasing me, twins, because when I finally speak your language, you're going to be shocked. Outside, the twin moons of Varith hung side by side, glowing silver over the endless plains. And somewhere far below, two sisters laughed under the same light, never realizing the human they mocked understood every word. Not yet. But soon. The next morning came with soft blue light seeping through the crystal walls of the citadel. The air on Varith always shimmered, full of quiet energy, like the world itself was alive. Lieutenant Jack Mercer woke early, still hearing the twins' laughter in his mind from the day before. Every time they teased him, it wasn't cruel, it was playful, curious. It was their way of testing him, like two bright stars orbiting too close. He smiled as he got ready. Today was another survey day, another excuse to work beside Lyra and Sura Velthier, the alien sisters who could make him feel both completely out of place and strangely at home. When he arrived at the hangar, they were already there. Sura stood tall, her silver-blue armor polished to a mirror shine, her expression serious as always. Lyra, meanwhile, was perched on the edge of the transport ramp, idly spinning a crystal tool in her hand and humming softly. Human Jack, Sura greeted, her voice even informal. You are punctual, that is rare for your kind. Jack grinned. We learn fast when we have good teachers. Lyra looked up, amused. He flatters us now. Perhaps he wants an easier day. Jack shrugged, worth a try. They both shared a look, the kind only siblings could. Then Sura nodded toward the ship. Come, the dunes wait for no one. The transport glided over the glass plains like a ghost, its engines whispering softly. The endless horizon glowed gold beneath the rising sun. The dunes sparkled like frozen waves, and shards of crystal light flickered beneath the sand. Jack watched from the window, stunned again by the beauty of this world. It's incredible, he murmured. It is home, Sura said softly, and home teaches us everything. Including how to make fun of visitors, Lyra added with a smirk. Sura shot her a sharp glance. Lyra. What? I only said the truth. Jack laughed under his breath, pretending not to understand the Varen words, but he caught every syllable, every teasing spark in Lyra's voice. It had become their daily dance. They'd talk freely in their language, certain he couldn't follow, and he'd smile quietly, pretending to be the clueless human. It wasn't just amusement anymore. There was comfort in it, a kind of closeness they didn't realize they were building. When they landed, the air shimmered with dry heat. They spread out to place sensor beacons along the ridge. The sisters moved gracefully, their long strides leaving barely a trace on the glittering sand. Jack, sweating under his gear, worked slower, his boots sinking deep. Lyra's voice drifted over the wind, teasing and musical. He struggles again, sister. Humans were not built for the desert, Sura replied. Their skin is too weak, their bodies too heavy. But he keeps going, Lyra said. He does not complain, strange. Jack wiped his brow, hiding a smile. He waited a few seconds, then called out, "Everything okay over there?" Lyra turned, blinking innocently. "Perfect, human Jack. Do you require help?" He shook his head. "Nah, I'm good, just enjoying the weather." Sura frowned slightly. "You enjoy this heat?" "Sure," Jack said, grinning. "Reminds me of home." Lyra laughed. "Then your world must be cruel." Jack chuckled. "Only when it's honest." That made Sura pause. "An interesting answer," she said softly. "Humans are interesting," Lyra whispered in Veyron. Jack's heart skipped. He didn't know what it was about that moment. The way the sunlight caught her eyes, or the hint of warmth in her tone. But for a second, the desert didn't feel so empty. As the sun sank lower, the winds changed. The air began to hum, a strange vibration rolling across the plains. Sura straightened instantly, her tendrils stiffening. "A storm is coming," she said sharply. "We must return." Jack followed her gaze. Far on the horizon, a wall of golden sand and lightning moved toward them. It looked like the sky itself was collapsing. They ran for the transport, the wind already rising around them. Lyra shouted something in Veyron that the storm tore away. Jack grabbed the last beacon, diving into the ramp as the engines flared to life. Inside, the sisters worked fast, voices overlapping, one commanding, one calming. Jack helped where he could, holding panels, checking seals, his hands steady even as the ship shook violently. Then a sudden jolt threw Lyra off balance. Without thinking, Jack reached out and caught her arm, pulling her back before she hit the wall. Their eyes met, his brown, her silver blue, and time seemed to stop for one heartbeat. She blinked, surprised. "You move fast, human." He smiled faintly. "When it matters." "Perhaps," Sura called over her shoulder, "you are not as fragile as you look." "No," Lyra said softly, still holding his gaze. "He is not fragile at all." When the storm finally passed, the desert was quiet again, endless and still. They camped beneath the shelter of the ship, the air cool and glowing with faint starlight. Lyra handed Jack a piece of glowing fruit that pulsed softly in her palm. He took it, tasted it, and winced. "Sour." She laughed, bright and clear. "It is an acquired taste." He smiled. "Guess I'll have to keep trying then." Sura sat nearby, polishing a piece of crystal. "Tell me, human," she said, "why do your kind risk so much to travel so far?" Jack looked up at the stars. "Because we can. Because we need to know what's out there, even if it scares us." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. "You fear, yet you move forward anyway." "Every time," he said simply. The sisters exchanged a quiet look, one of understanding, maybe even respect. And though the night wind was cold, Jack felt warmth spreading through him. He didn't belong here. He knew that. But for the first time, sitting beneath an alien sky with two impossible beings beside him, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like he was meant to be here. And he didn't know it yet, but by the time the next storm came, their lives would never be the same again. The desert sky was still when morning came, too still. Jack woke to silence. No birds, no wind, no hum of the crystal dunes that usually whispered under the sun. The air felt thick, heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Lyra and Sura were already outside, scanning the horizon. The twin suns were half risen, casting a golden glow over the endless plains. "The winds are shifting again," Sura said, her voice tense. "I can feel the charge in the air." "Another storm?" Lyra asked. "Worse," Sura replied quietly. "A lightning surge. We must return to the citadel." Jack stood beside them, watching the sky darken. Strange clouds twisted above, not gray or white, but deep violet, crackling faintly with light. He'd seen storms on 100 worlds, but this was alive. "We'll make it back," he said calmly, "if we move now." Lyra glanced at him, faint amusement flickering in her eyes even through the tension. "Always so certain, human." He smiled faintly. It's part of the job. Then your job is madness, Sura muttered, but she didn't argue. They boarded the transport quickly, systems humming as they lifted off the sand. The storm loomed ahead, a swirling wall of gold and purple lightning, rolling across the plains like an ocean wave. The first shock hit before they reached altitude. A bolt of energy struck the ship's right wing, sending it spinning sideways. Jack grabbed the control handles, muscles straining as alarms screamed through the cabin. "Hold on," he shouted. "Stabilizers offline," Sura yelled. "We are losing power." "Jack," Lyra's voice rose, fear breaking through her usual calm. "The fuel core." He saw it too, a flicker of orange heat under the floor panels. The impact had ruptured a line. Sparks licked along the seam, creeping closer to the volatile fuel cells. "Get to the back," he barked. "Now." "What are you doing?" Sura demanded. "Saving our skins." He ripped the panel open and sprayed emergency foam across the leak, the air filling with the acrid smell of burning metal. His visor screen flashed red warnings, but he ignored them. The foam hissed and smoked, not enough to contain the fire. "It's spreading," Lyra cried. "Jack, you must move." "Not yet," he said through clenched teeth, gripping the thermal clamp. "If I don't seal it, this whole ship goes up." The heat burned through his gloves. His vision blurred, sweat running into his eyes. Sura tried to push past him, but he shoved her back. "No, I've got it." "You will die," she shouted. "Then you'll owe me one hell of a funeral." He slammed the clamp down. The fire roared once, then died with a hiss, leaving only the hum of cooling metal. For a second, there was nothing but silence. Then Lyra's trembling voice broke it. You fool, you could have burned alive." Jack leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. Wouldn't be the first time. They managed to steady the transport, coasting low over the sand until the storm forced them down. The crash wasn't violent, more like a fall onto soft dunes, but the jolt knocked them all forward. The ship came to rest tilted on one side, half buried in glowing dust. Outside, the storm raged, lightning striking in waves, golden sand spinning high into the air. They had no choice but to wait it out. Inside the tilted cabin, the air was warm and still. Jack's arm was bleeding from a deep gash, and his uniform smelled faintly of burnt fabric. Sura tore a strip of her cloak and knelt beside him. "Hold still," she ordered. He chuckled weakly. "You always sound like you're in charge." "Because I am," she replied, pressing the fabric against his wound. "And I let you," he teased. Lyra sat nearby, watching them quietly. Her usual smirk was gone, replaced by something softer. "You risked your life for us," she said quietly. "Why?" Jack blinked. "Because we were a team." "Teams do not die for each other," Sura said. He met her gaze. "The good ones do." For a long moment, neither sister spoke. The wind howled outside, rattling the hull. Finally, Lyra leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "You understand us, don't you?" Jack froze. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "You react too quickly. You move when we speak in our tongue." He forced a tired smile. "Just lucky guesses." "Lies," Sura said softly. He didn't answer. Lyra studied him for a moment longer, then smiled faintly, not teasing this time, but almost proud. "Good," she said. "Maybe our human isn't as simple as we thought." Sura frowned but said nothing. She just finished bandaging his arm, her touch surprisingly gentle. The storm lasted through the night. They sat together in the flickering light of a small beacon, the air filled with the hum of static. Every now and then, the walls shook as thunder rolled across the dunes. Jack leaned against the wall, exhaustion pulling at his eyes. "You should rest," Sura said softly. "I'll rest when we're home," he murmured. "You have earned it," Lyra said, voice quiet. "You fight the storm as if you were born to it." He smiled faintly. Humans are stubborn. It's our best and worst trait. And now, Sura said, her gaze steady, I understand why your kind survived the wars. Because we don't know when to quit, he joked. Because you never stop protecting others, she corrected. Her words lingered in the air, a strange warmth beneath the sound of thunder. Lyra rested her chin on her knees, watching him. You make us see humans differently, Jack Mercer. He smiled weakly. Then I'm doing my job. Outside, the lightning faded. The storm was ending. But inside that broken ship, something new had begun. A bond forged not by duty, but by fire and courage. And though the night was quiet again, the twins could not forget the human who stood between them and death without fear, or the way he had looked at them with those strange, honest eyes that spoke every language without a word. The dawn came quietly after the storm. The golden dunes stretched endlessly beneath a pale silver sky. Shards of crystal sparkled across the sand where lightning had struck. It was beautiful and haunting. The wrecked transport lay half-buried near a ridge, smoke still rising from its damaged hull. Inside, the air was cold and still. Jack Mercer stirred awake, his body aching, his arm bandaged in neat layers of silver cloth. The faint hum of the beacon filled the cabin. He blinked and saw them. Lyra sat cross-legged near the firelight, polishing her blade, her 4 eyes calm and thoughtful. Sura stood by the hatch, watching the horizon, her back straight, her presence sharp as ever. For a long moment he just watched them, the way the light touched their faces, the quiet strength between them. They looked unbreakable. And yet, for the first time, they seemed human. He smiled softly to himself, then winced as pain shot up his arm. You should not move, Sura said without turning around. Her voice was calm, but there was something gentler beneath it now. Morning to you too, Jack said with a grin. We still breathing? Barely, Lyra said, smiling faintly. But you snored through half the sunrise, so yes, we live. Jack chuckled. That's one way to measure survival. She tilted her head, studying him. Humor, she said softly. Even when hurt, you humans use laughter like armor. He met her gaze. It's lighter than metal, and it works most of the time. Sura finally turned from the hatch. You risked your life yesterday. You acted before either of us could move. Jack shrugged. Wasn't really thinking, just did what had to be done. Lyra's eyes softened. You could have died, Jack Mercer. He looked at her, a tired smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, but you didn't. The twins exchanged a glance. Something passed between them, silent and deep. Then softly, in their own language, Lyra whispered, He saved us, sister. Why? Sura answered in the same tongue. Because humans are strange. They feel before they think. Jack's smile faded. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Maybe, he said quietly, in perfect, fluent Varan, that's what makes us who we are. The fire crackled. The air went still. Both sisters froze. Sura's eyes widened. Lyra's hands went still, her blade slipping from her grasp, landing softly on the floor. You, Lyra whispered, voice trembling. You understand us. Jack nodded slowly, eyes calm. I always did. Always? Sura's tone was sharper now, full of disbelief. Since when? The day I landed here. The silence that followed was deep enough to feel. Lyra stood, staring at him as if she didn't recognize the man in front of her. You heard us, every word. He nodded. Every tease, she asked softly. A small smile touched his lips. Every one. Every time we called you curious or fragile. Yeah. And you said nothing, Sura demanded. You let us. Be yourselves, he finished gently. Yes. Lyra took a step closer, her voice shaking between anger and awe. Why? Jack met her gaze steadily. Because when people think you can't understand them, that's when they show who they really are. Her lips parted, words caught in her throat. Sura said nothing, her expression unreadable, but her 4 eyes flickered with something like respect. "You are not what we thought you were," Sura murmured. "Good," Jack said, "because I never wanted to be what anyone expected." For a long while, none of them spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the desert wind against the hull. Finally, Lyra knelt beside him, her tone softer now. "You could have used our words against us, mocked us, but you didn't." He smiled faintly. "Didn't need to. You were already laughing enough for all 3 of us." That made her laugh, a real one, light and pure. "You are either brave or foolish human." "Probably both," he said. "And you are honest," Sura added quietly. "That is rare. Guess that's one human habit worth keeping." They spent the rest of the day repairing what they could of the ship, though it was hopeless. The power core was burnt beyond recovery, but the storm had cleared the sky, revealing twin suns high and bright above the golden dunes. Lyra joined Jack as he stood outside the wreck, looking toward the horizon. "You listened to our stories," she said softly, "even when we thought you couldn't." "I liked them," he said simply. "Your legends, your songs, the way you talk about this world, it's beautiful." She looked at him curiously. "And what do humans tell stories about?" He smiled faintly. "About love, about loss, about standing up even when the universe says you shouldn't." Lyra turned her head slightly, her lower eyes blinking, the Varen gesture of emotion. "Then we are not so different." He looked at her, eyes soft. "Never were." When night fell, they made a small fire and sat close, the air cool and bright with stars. The flames reflected in the twins' eyes, and for the first time the teasing was gone. There was something deeper there now, something fragile and real. Lyra leaned forward. "Tell us, Jack Mercer," she said softly, "why did you really come here?" He thought for a moment, then smiled. "To learn what makes us all the same." Sura tilted her head. "And have you found it?" He looked between them, his voice low and certain. "Yes, right here." The wind carried silence for a moment, and then Lyra's tendrils brushed his hand, a gesture of closeness, uncertain but sincere. "You speak our language," she whispered, "but you also speak something more." He smiled. "Heart doesn't need translation." For once, neither of them teased, neither looked away. The stars above shimmered brighter, and under that silver sky, 3 souls from 2 worlds sat together, no longer strangers, no longer guessing, and for the first time they all understood each other completely. The sun rose over the dunes of Varith like molten silver, pouring light across the broken desert. Jack sat on a rock near the half-buried ship, watching the horizon. The wind was cool now, the storm long gone, but the world still hummed, a faint vibration that always followed the lightning storms. Behind him, Lyra and Sura worked together, repairing what little they could. They didn't speak much, not after what happened the night before. When he had spoken in their language, their sacred tongue, something had changed. They looked at him differently now, not with mockery or curiosity, but something deeper, heavier, as if they had finally seen him not as a visitor or an amusement, but as something they could feel. And it scared them. It scared him too. "Signal beacon is still active," Sura said at last. "Rescue ships from the Citadel should reach us soon." "Soon," Lyra echoed, though her voice sounded uncertain. Jack nodded quietly. "Good. Maybe I can stop playing mechanic before I break something else." Neither laughed. He sighed softly. "All right, what's wrong?" Lyra looked up sharply. "Nothing." Sura didn't glance away. "Everything." He frowned. "Okay, that's not confusing at all." "You broke the silence, human," Sura said. "You spoke words you should not have known, words of our ancestors. How?" Jack looked between them, honest and calm. "I studied. I learned. It's not forbidden to listen." "It is," Sura said sharply. "Among us our tongue is sacred. Even allies do not." "Sister," Lyra interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. "He did not use it to mock us. He used it to save us." Sura's lips pressed into a thin line. And now what? The council will ask where he learned it. They will see it as an insult. Then let them ask, Jack said. I'll tell them the truth, that I learned because I wanted to understand. To understand what? Sura asked quietly. He met her gaze. You. The wind stirred the sand between them. For a moment, even the desert seemed to pause. Lyra's lower eyes blinked softly, surprise, maybe even warmth. You studied our words for us. Jack nodded. Yeah, I wanted to hear you, not through a translator, not through machines, just you. She smiled, faint, uncertain, beautiful. Sura turned away, but her voice softened. You are a strange creature, human Jack. He laughed quietly. You've mentioned that before. And you never disagree. Because it's true. The sound of engines broke the moment. A distant shimmer of light appeared in the sky, silver, growing brighter, the shape of a large Varen rescue vessel descending through the thin clouds. They're here, Lyra said. Finally, Sura replied, straightening her armor. Prepare to answer questions. The council will want explanations. Jack stood, brushing sand from his uniform. Let me handle that part. You would speak for us? Sura asked. Why not? I'm already in trouble for talking too much. Lyra laughed softly, and Sura's mouth twitched, almost a smile. As the rescue ship landed, the air shimmered with light. 3 armored Varen officers stepped down, their movements graceful but guarded. Their leader, Commander Thesh, regarded Jack with cold curiosity. Human, he said in the universal tongue. You survive a storm no one else could. Impressive. Jack gave a small, polite nod. I had help. Yes, the commander said, glancing at the twins. 2 of our finest warriors risked themselves for you. Why? Before Lyra or Sura could answer, Jack stepped forward. Because I would have done the same for them. The commander's eyes narrowed. You assume equality between your kind and ours. Jack met his gaze without flinching. I don't assume it, I prove it. A murmur ran through the guards. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. Sura's hand twitched, not to stop him, but to steady herself. You speak boldly, the commander said, perhaps too boldly. Jack smiled faintly. Humans usually do. You are reckless. Maybe, Jack said softly, but that's why you're alive to call me reckless. A long silence followed. Then the commander turned to the twins. You vouch for this one. Sura stood tall, with my life. Lyra nodded, and with mine. The commander studied them both, then exhaled slowly. Then so be it. Return to the citadel, all of you. The ship lifted into the air, leaving the broken dunes behind. Jack sat near the viewport, watching the golden desert fade below them. He could feel the weight of everything unspoken pressing between them. Questions, confessions, things that didn't fit into any language. Lyra sat beside him, her tendrils resting lightly against her arm. You spoke for us, she said quietly, even when they doubted. He smiled. Guess I talk too much after all. No, she said softly, you speak when it matters. Sura turned from the controls. You could have said nothing and been safe, but you did not. Jack shrugged. If safety's all I wanted, I wouldn't have joined the alliance. Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. And if curiosity's all you wanted? He met her gaze. Then I found more than I expected. She looked away quickly, but her cheeks glowed faint silver, the Varen color of emotion. Sura noticed and smirked ever so slightly. You are blushing, sister. So are you, Lyra muttered. Jack laughed softly, and for the first time since the storm, the air around them felt light again. Outside, the 2 suns began to rise higher, twin lights over a world that had changed. The sisters had once teased him, thinking him blind to their language. But now, they understood something far greater, that this human saw them not as alien or other, but as equals. And in the quiet of that rising light, as the ship carried them home, Both sisters realized something they had never expected. The human hadn't just learned their words. He had learned them. The Varith citadel shimmered in the sunlight like a living mountain made of glass. Its tall spires pulsed faintly, humming with energy that could be felt in the bones. Jack Mercer stood at the foot of its massive gates, his reflection rippling across the crystal walls. He felt small, a single human shadow surrounded by alien light. The rescue ship had brought them home, but it didn't feel like a rescue. It felt like walking into judgment. Behind him, Lyra and Sura Velthir walked silently, their armor gleaming, their faces unreadable. The twin guards of Varith, once his companions, now his protectors and maybe, just maybe, his friends. They entered the council hall together. The air inside was cool and sharp. The ceiling arched high above, alive with shifting colors that mirrored the sky outside. 12 Varen elders sat in a circle, their robes glowing with soft light, their eyes, 4 each, fixed on the human before them. At the center sat the High Chancellor, her voice deep and smooth as still water. "Lieutenant Jack Mercer of Earth," she began, "you have broken sacred code." Jack stood tall, though his stomach felt like lead. "If you mean speaking your language, then yes, I did." "And you admit it?" "I do." A low murmur passed among the elders. Lyra shifted beside him, her tendrils tightening. Sura's jaw tensed. "You learned our words without consent," the Chancellor continued. "You trespassed into what is private to our kind." Jack's voice was steady, quiet, but strong. "I didn't learn to trespass. I learned to understand." The hall grew silent. "Explain," the Chancellor said. Jack looked around at the glowing walls, the watching faces, the 2 sisters who had stood by him through storms and fire. He spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. "I came here to study storms," he said, "but I found something more powerful than any lightning. I found you, your world, your way of thinking, your songs. I wanted to understand what makes you who you are. I didn't want a machine between us. I wanted to hear you, really hear you." Lyra's eyes softened, her lower pair blinking rapidly. Sura stared straight ahead, her shoulders rigid. "You risked your life for my daughters," said one elder, his tone thoughtful. "Yet you would risk it again to defend them." Jack nodded, without hesitation. "Why?" another elder asked. "What makes 2 aliens worth such loyalty?" He smiled faintly. "Because they never treated me like one." A long silence followed. The elders exchanged quiet glances, the light in the hall shifting from cool blue to warm gold. Then the Chancellor turned to the sisters. "Lyra, Sura, you are guards of the royal line, you know the law. What is your word on this human?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Sura took a step forward first. Her voice was calm, but Jack could hear the tremor in it. "He broke a law, yes," she said, "but not out of greed or pride. He did what none of us ever thought a human could. He listened. He understood our words, our hearts, our silence. That is not a crime. It is courage." Lyra stepped beside her, her voice softer but full of feeling. "When the storm came, he saved us. He did not run, he did not hide. He faced the fire for us, for a world not his own. If that is a crime, then I will share his guilt." The hall glowed brighter. Murmurs rippled through the council, surprise flickering in their silver eyes. Jack stood still, heart pounding. The Chancellor watched the twins quietly. "You defend him strongly." "Because he is worth defending," Lyra said. "Because he has earned our trust," Sura added. The Chancellor leaned back in her seat, her many eyes reflecting the light like stars. "A human earning trust on Varith," she said softly. "This is rare, dangerous even." Jack exhaled slowly. "Then let me prove it." "Prove it?" "Yes," he said. "Send me back into the storms. Let me finish the mapping project, with your best crew, with them." He nodded to Lyra and Sura. "Let me show you what happens when humans and Varens work together, not as teacher and student, but as equals." The room went quiet again. Lyra looked at him wide-eyed. "Jack, you don't have to." He cut her off with a small smile. "I want to." Sura frowned. "You would face another storm after nearly dying." He met her gaze. "If it helps your people trust mine, it's worth it." The Chancellor's voice broke the silence. "You are either brave or a fool." Jack smiled faintly, "Probably both." For the first time, the High Chancellor laughed, a quiet, melodic sound that echoed through the chamber. "Then let us see which one you are." Hours later, when the hall emptied and the decision was sealed, Jack walked with the twins along the crystal bridge that connected the Citadel's towers. The sky was deep blue now, filled with drifting clouds that glowed like silver smoke. Lyra walked close beside him, her voice low. "You could have stayed silent. You could have gone home." He looked out at the horizon. "Home, not always where you start." Sura crossed her arms. "You risked everything again." Jack smiled. "That's kind of my thing." She sighed, shaking her head. "Humans, you never know when to stop." He chuckled. "If we did, we'd still be staring at the stars instead of walking among them." Lyra's lower eyes blinked softly, the Varen sign of affection. "You are different, Jack Mercer. You do not just speak our language, you believe in it." He met her gaze, his voice quiet. "Maybe that's the only real way to learn a language, through the heart." For a moment, they stood there together under the glowing sky. Three figures from different worlds, united by storms, by words, by something that didn't need translating. Far below, the wind sang across the plains, whispering in both tongues. Trust once earned can change worlds. The night sky over Varith burned with twin moons and countless stars. The air shimmered softly, alive with light that danced like fireflies above the desert. From the Citadel's highest balcony, Jack Mercer watched the horizon glow. It had been 3 days since the council hearing, 3 long days of waiting, thinking, and wondering what would come next. Below him, the city pulsed with quiet energy. Varen towers rose like spears of glass, connected by bridges of living crystal. The entire world felt alive, breathing, glowing. It was no longer alien to him. It felt like home. The door behind him opened, and he didn't have to turn to know who it was. "You still prefer watching the sky alone, human?" came Lyra's soft, teasing voice. Jack smiled. "You're quiet tonight. I was starting to think I'd finally run out of things for you to tease me about." "Impossible," she said, stepping beside him. "There is always something." Her eyes glimmered in the moonlight, all 4 focused on the horizon. The silver of her skin seemed to reflect the stars themselves. "Sura is coming," she added. "She said you will need both of us tonight." Jack frowned slightly. "That sounds ominous." Lyra gave a small smile. "You said you wanted to prove your worth. The council accepted your offer." He turned to face her fully. "The mission." She nodded. "Another storm is forming beyond the Crystal Ridge, a storm far stronger than before. They want you to map its core energy. No one has ever gone that deep and lived." Jack exhaled slowly, his heart thudding. "Guess I get to make history again." "You will not be alone," came Sura's voice as she entered, armor shining in the low light. "We will go with you." Jack met her eyes, calm, steady, unshakable. "Then I know we'll make it." "You always say that," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Because we always do." The storm waited for them at the edge of the world. They flew low in a reinforced survey craft, a sleek Varen design, humming softly like a heartbeat. The clouds ahead churned like molten gold, flashing with streaks of lightning that reached toward the ground like claws. The sight stole Jack's breath. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "And deadly," Sura said. "The energy readings are rising faster than expected." "If we get closer, the systems might not hold," Lyra warned. Jack looked out the viewport, his face illuminated by the flickering light. "Then we'll do it fast, in and out. One good scan and we're done." The ship trembled as it entered the storm's edge. Wind howled, lightning split the sky, and colors no human eye had ever seen dance through the clouds. Every alarm screamed at once. "Shields are failing," Sura shouted. "We need more power to the core," Lyra called out. Jack's hands flew over the controls, fingers steady despite the chaos. "Rerouting systems, hang on." A blinding flash filled the cockpit. The ship lurched violently, then everything went white. When Jack opened his eyes, the world was sideways. Smoke filled the air, and the taste of ozone burned his throat. "Lyra," he called weakly. "Sura." "Here," Sura answered, coughing. She crawled out from the wreckage, her armor cracked but intact. "I am here," Lyra said softly, limping toward him. Her arm was cut, glowing faintly with blue light. Jack pushed himself up, ignoring the pain. "We're still alive, that's a start." Outside, the storm roared, waves of light and energy swirling like a living thing. Sura looked at the scanner. "The readings are perfect, but the transmitter is destroyed. We cannot send the data." Jack followed her gaze. "We can still save it manually. There's a relay beacon near the ridge." "It is on the other side of the lightning field," Lyra said. "No ship can pass through that." Jack's eyes hardened. "Then I'll go on foot." "You will not survive," Sura snapped. "Then I'll die trying," he said quietly. The sisters stared at him, the fragile human who refused to break. "You do not know when to stop," Sura said again, shaking her head. He smiled. "That's what makes us human." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes soft. "Then we will not stop either." Sura sighed deeply. "Foolish." "Maybe," Lyra said gently, "but he is our fool." They went together, walking into the storm. Lightning cracked around them, bright enough to turn night into day. The air shimmered, heavy with power. Jack led the way, his suit sparking, his boots sinking into the glowing sand. Every step was harder than the last. The ground trembled beneath them, and the wind screamed in voices that almost sounded alive. At last they reached the beacon, a tall spire of glass half buried in the ridge. Jack slammed the data core into the slot and powered it up. "Come on," he muttered, "just work." The console flickered, then glowed steady. A pulse of light shot upward, cutting through the storm, carrying their data to the Citadel. It worked. And then the beacon exploded. Jack was thrown backward, tumbling across the sand. Pain tore through him, white-hot. He heard Lyra scream his name, felt Sura's arms grab him. The world was fading fast. "Stay with us, human," Sura shouted. He managed a weak smile. "Told you we'd make it." Lyra's voice shook. "You cannot leave us now." Jack's vision blurred, two silver faces above him, glowing in the stormlight. "Hey," he whispered faintly. "When I spoke your language, I didn't just want to be understood. I wanted to belong." Lyra took his hand, tears glimmering like starlight. "You already do." Sura pressed her forehead to his. "Rest, human, the storm is over." And then, like a dying star, everything went dark. When Jack opened his eyes again, he was surrounded by soft light. He was in a healing chamber back in the Citadel, his wounds wrapped in silver threads. Two familiar shapes stood beside his bed. Lyra smiled softly. "You did it. The council named the storm after you, Mercer's heart." Sura nodded, "And they gave you a title." Jack blinked. "Title?" Lyra's eyes shone. "Guardian of Two Worlds." He laughed weakly. "That's a bit dramatic." Sura smirked. "Fitting." Lyra leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Human, why are you watching me again?" He smiled. "Because I still can't believe you're real." She brushed her tendrils across his hand. "Then keep watching." Outside, the twin suns rose over Varith, golden light spilling across the city. And in that moment, under alien skis, a single human heart beat among the stars, not as a stranger, but as one of their own.